Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, back and forth between Israel and the U.S. over a ceasefire and the state of Hamas. Plus, analysis from Caroline Glick. Targeting instigators on U.S. college campuses. Lawsuits strike back at radical Muslim organizations. And a new book reveals explosive information about the Yom Kippur War. Did a faction within the National Security Agency mislead Israel about the imminent attack in 1973? All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Sad news for Israel as the IDF learned that more bodies are being held by Hamas. At the same time, the U.S. is pressuring Israel to agree to a ceasefire deal. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
The Israeli military confirmed that 4 more hostages died in captivity in Gaza. 3 of them were seen alive in a Hamas propaganda video released earlier.
Their loved ones were killed a few months ago during Hamas captivity in Gaza, and their bodies are still being held by Hamas. We assess that the 4 of them were killed while together in the area of Khan Yunis during our operation there against Hamas.
The Biden administration claims the remaining hostages could be freed and the war ended if Hamas and Israel would agree to its ceasefire proposal. They say the IDF's war on Hamas has so weakened the terrorist group that it doesn't have the capability to launch deadly attacks like the one on October 7th.
Endless conflict in Gaza in pursuit of some idea of total victory is not going to make Israel safer.
Israelis say the pitched battles that still continue in Gaza and the ongoing rocket launches prove that Hamas is far from defeated. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects any plan that would end the war before destroying Hamas's ability to govern Gaza and strike the Jewish nation. He maintains he's sticking to his war cabinet's goal from the start: no peace till Hamas has been eliminated and all the hostages freed.
We insist that we complete both this and that. It's part of the outline. It's not something I'm adding now. It's not something I'm adding because I was pressured in the coalition. It's something we unanimously agreed on in the war cabinet with one voice.
Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations is urging the UN Security Council to support the 3-phased plan announced by President Biden to end the war. Israeli commentator Caroline Glick tells CBN News it's an end run by the Biden administration.
So this is a way of going around the Israeli government, going around the Israeli people, going around the American people, to try to compel Israel to capitulate through the United Nations. They did the same thing in 2016 with the nuclear deal that President Obama finalized with Iran that gave Iran an open path to a nuclear arsenal.
Meanwhile, in northern Israel, Israeli troops and fire and rescue services have gained control over raging fires sparked by Hezbollah rocket fire in the Galilee. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
There's a lot of talk in Israel now about the ceasefire proposal presented by the U.S. that supposedly came from Israel. But the proposal that President Biden said came from Israel is not the same one Israel had in mind. I spoke with political analyst Caroline Glick to hear her thoughts on it all. Caroline Glick, thanks so much for joining us. The other day on Friday, just before Shabbat, President Biden delivered a speech urging Hamas to accept an Israeli proposal. Was this an Israeli proposal?
No, it wasn't. And it was actually just after Shabbat started in Israel, so that the government couldn't even offer any explanation or response to it because they don't operate on Shabbat. So, I mean, you know, I think parts of it reflected a proposal that Israel had put out, but that what he said there about the nature of the proposal is not the Israeli proposal at all. It's Hamas's proposal. So no, the government's position, as retold by President Biden, was not the government's position, not the government of Israel's position.
Yeah. How do you explain what the United States is doing in the Biden administration?
So, I mean, I think that the main thing that we know for certain about what Israel proposed versus what Biden presented as Israel's proposal is that Israel did not propose a deal that would lead to cessation of the war. That was not in the Israeli proposal. It's also not in the proposal that Israel presented, that the United States gets to be an arbiter of Israeli compliance with whatever temporary ceasefire they put together for what's supposed to be the phase one of the hostage release deal. Because what Biden presented there was that Israel effectively gives up its right to self-defense in the framework of this deal because it doesn't decide whether Hamas is behaving in accordance with what was agreed to or not. The United States, Egypt, and Qatar, with Egypt and Qatar both serving as Hamas's state sponsors, they get to decide whether Hamas is abiding by the agreement, and the United States would punish Israel if Israel decided that it was going back to war because Hamas is not abiding by its agreement. So this is a very, very dangerous move by the Biden administration.
Do you think they're trying to encourage Israel to capitulate?
I think they're trying to force Israel to capitulate. And my fears were borne out this morning when I woke up and discovered that the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thompson, has submitted the ceasefire deal that Biden proposed, claiming that it was Israel's, but it's clearly not Israel's ceasefire proposal. She presented it to the UN Security Council, and she wants to turn it into a resolution that binds Israel. And Samantha Power, who was then the UN ambassador, presented it as a binding Security Council resolution in order to prevent the Senate from overturning the deal.
You gave a very complete analysis of this on your show, the Caroline Glick Show, which I encourage everyone to look into. You mentioned about what Israelis want. What do the majority of Israelis want out of this war?
Why don't we put aside what the majority of Israelis want? I mean, the majority of Israelis want Gaza to turn into a parking lot, more or less, after what happened to us on October 7th. But the government at the outset of the war, right after October 7th, defined 3 goals for the war. The first goal is the destruction of Hamas as a military organization and as a regime in Gaza, as a political force in Gaza. The second is the return of all of the hostages from Gaza back to Israel. And the third one is to prevent Gaza from posing a security threat to Israel in the future. And none of those goals are achieved under the ceasefire deal that President Biden proposed, that then he presented, that he claims was Israel's ceasefire deal. The Biden deal, and in fact, the State Department spokesman Matthew Miller acknowledged this yesterday in a briefing. The State Department, the president's proposal on Friday night was actually Hamas's proposal, and he said so. Miller said it was nearly identical to what Hamas proposed 2 weeks ago. And that is the reason why Hamas proposed it, is because it leaves Hamas in charge of Gaza politically, and it does not dismantle Hamas as a military organization. It does not guarantee the return of all of the hostages home, and it certainly does not prevent Gaza from posing a security threat to Israel over the long term. It, in fact, guarantees that Gaza will remain a strategic threat to Israel over the long term. And not only that, it will tie Israel's arms behind its back to prevent Israel from ever, being able to defend itself against Gaza in the future in any significant way. So this is Hamas's proposal that the United States is misrepresenting as Israel's proposal.
Up next, efforts to hit Hamas hard through legal action targeting collaborators on U.S. campuses. A U.S. law firm and an Israeli legal group have teamed up to sue 2 organizations involved in recent college campus protests. We spoke with one of the attorneys here in Jerusalem about their lawsuit's goals. Pro-Palestinian demonstrations began at Columbia University and quickly spread to college campuses coast to coast. Authorities dealing with the unrest found a number of outside groups supported the protest and even encouraged violence. The lawsuit filed in Virginia accuses the American Muslims for Palestine and National Students for Justice in Palestine of collaborating with Hamas to serve as their propaganda division in the U.S.
These groups are the primary drivers of what we're seeing today happening across campuses in the United States, which have effectively become a second front for Hamas since October 7.
Arsen Ostrovsky, CEO of the International Legal Forum, working with the U.S. legal team of Greenberg Traurig and the National Jewish Advocacy Center, describes what these groups are doing.
They are acting and serving in collaboration and coordination with Hamas, essentially as propagandists and collaborators on campus to try and promote the Hamas extremist ideology.
Ostrovsky tells CBN News these groups began mobilizing the day after October 7th. The lawsuit documents how these groups became the foot soldiers of Hamas on U.S. college campuses.
Hamas issued a call to action, and the very next day, SJP and their affiliates throughout the United States, they answered that call. They answered that directive. They created a toolkit, a manifesto for their chapters across the United States, echoing the language, the terminology, the instructions by the Hamas terror group, and propagated that across campuses.
The lawsuit also seeks compensation for damages.
There are 9 plaintiffs, including Americans and Israelis as well, and these plaintiffs include victims of survivors of the Nova massacre. They include those that have been displaced, and they also include family members of those that have been massacred by Hamas.
Ostrovsky hopes they can shut these groups down by proving they've violated the U.S. Anti-Terrorism Act by aiding and abetting a terror group.
They're the ones fomenting the hatred, the anti-Semitism, the harassment of Jewish students. We need to shut them down, and we can do that legally by branding them as a terrorist organization, as a collaborator of the Hamas terror group, and making sure once and for all they cannot be active on campus.
Ostrovsky says in addition to the military battlefield, Israel must fight in the international legal arena.
Today, what we're seeing is that the state of Israel is being demonized and vilified and delegitimized and painted as a pariah, where we're seeing the international law not only being misused, but being turned into an act of lawfare against us for the simple act of defending our citizens, trying to bring back our captives. We need to change this paradigm, and we need to hold not only the perpetrators, the Hamas, accountable, but all those that enable, support, aid, abet, and fund them. And that is how we're using the law to go after all those who are supporting Hamas. And we will hold them accountable, and we will do that through the courts.
Coming up, allegations of treachery by the U.S. towards Israel, just as the 1973 Yom Kippur War was about to happen. Why was Israel caught off guard 50 years ago during the Yom Kippur War? The answer may shock you. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl spoke with author Bruce Brill, whose new book has the answer.
Bruce Brill, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline.
Thank you.
Now, you're a former intelligence analyst with the U.S. National Security Agency, the NSA, and you were there in 1973. Before, during, and after the Yom Kippur War.
Correct.
And you've written a book about that, Deceit of an Ally, a memoir of military anti-Semitism, NSA's secret Jew room, and Yom Kippur War treachery. It's in 2 languages. It's in Hebrew and English. And now we know that when Israel was attacked by Syria and Egypt on Yom Kippur, it was a total surprise to Israel, even though the signs were there. But you say in your book that it wasn't a surprise to the United States. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, it was not at all a surprise. We knew days in advance, we knew definitively, and we even knew on what day the attack was going to happen. We knew all this. Unfortunately, we passed misinformation to the head of Israeli military intelligence, General Eli Zira, and he relied on our assessment, which was a false assessment, that there was nothing to worry about. The Arabs were not going to attack on or before October 6th. There was something that John Loftus, in his book, called The Secret War Against the Jews, calls the Jew room. And he says it's an absolute misnomer because Jews are not only not allowed entry into the Jew room, They weren't even allowed to know that it existed. And number two, it wasn't just one room. It was a complex of rooms. So in this cabal is where operations against Israel came about. And so I believe that the intelligence assessment that was passed to General Eli Ze'ira, and to Moshe Dayan too, by the way, was corrupted by the Jew room before it even got to American generals in intelligence that Eli Ze'ira was in contact with.
Wow. So now, is this an official thing, this Jew room, or is it just kind of a known thing and it's under the table? What is it?
It's totally unknown except to people that are privy to entry into the Jew room, and I call them the Jew room crowd. It may not have been known even to the President of the United States.
Wow. I
don't know. My assumption, in that Richard Nixon did come to Israel's rescue, was unaware of the shenanigans going on in the Jew room, works against Israel.
So now let's fast forward to October 7th.
Right.
Almost 50 years to the day of the Yom Kippur War. Do you think, I know you're not in the NSA anymore, do you think it's possible something like that happened on October 7th? There were so many signs that there was going to be an attack, and nobody seemed to listen. Do you think they were getting counterintelligence, or could have been getting counterintelligence?
That was the first thing that came to my mind, of course. And there are hints that that was a possibility.
Now, America is considered to be Israel's closest ally. What's your response to that statement?
How do you find America? America is huge. How do you define the American government? That's also huge. It has many different parts. How do you define the American intelligence community? That's also huge. NSA itself is humongous. So here, within the agency, there are elements that work against Israel. So they have to be found out, and they have to be undone, and America should work for America and for America's allies, not against America's allies.
Bruce Brill, author of Deceit of an Ally. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Still ahead, how Christians can support and pray for the Jewish state in its hour of need. Thank you for watching Jerusalem Dateline. We're committed to providing you with unbiased reporting from the Holy Land. Through weekly broadcasts, podcasts, and online media, our vision is to reach millions around the globe with the true story of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East, all from a biblical and prophetic perspective. This is a big vision and is only made possible by the generous support of people like you.
Call us toll-free at 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/Jerusalem Dateline and make a donation that will help spread the light of truth about Israel throughout the world.
In a follow-up from our interview, here's a few more points from Caroline Glick about how Christians can be supporting Israel right now. Caroline, I know you spoke recently at a pro-Israel rally in Nashville. How can Christians support and pray for Israel at this time in its history?
I think it's critical. I was just at a wonderful conference in Nashville that was organized by HaYovel organization, and that brought together hundreds and hundreds of evangelicals really from all over the country to talk about how to support Israel. And I think that it's very important for everybody who cares about Israel to speak up, to write letters to their congressmen, to speak in their church and ask their church to have public demonstrations for Israel and for Israel's right to self-defense. and expect, there are laws going through the Congress right now. There's a law right now to sanction the International Criminal Court for its illegal investigation and plan to issue international arrest warrants against Israel's leaders. And I know Representative Chip Roy and another 20 co-sponsors are pushing that through the House and in the Senate as well. Tom Cotton is pushing it through. It's very important to get that through. And it's important for Congress to have hearings on what the administration is doing so the American people can understand that. It's important to speak to your congressman and talk about the need to do these kinds of things so that the truth about what the Biden administration is doing to Israel is revealed to the American people so that they understand what's happening.
Yeah. And people want to see you, find you online. Where can they go?
So I'm always updating my Twitter feed in Hebrew and in English, and that's at Caroline Glick on Twitter or X platform now. And they can read me at jns.org, or on my website, carolineglick.com.
Okay,
they can see all my work.
Okay. Great. Caroline Glick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. God bless you, and thank you for supporting Israel.
That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Here's Psalm 91, verses 9 through 16 to encourage us. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you, no disaster will come near your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against the stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in times of trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Thanks for joining us. Remember to keep praying for the hostages, the IDF soldiers, and all those in harm's way. And you can follow us on social media and access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.